Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the MLR Civic Roundtable. We are covering, each month we pick up a different topic. Uh, Tonight's topic is Project WET, Water Education Today. And I'm really excited about this because it's a very flexible program. When we think about, increasing the capacity of our lake associations, one of the stories that I think about most often is the Chesapeake Bay. And what they started with when they began to uh, protect and improve the Chesapeake Bay, which was very, very polluted, was they started with education. And they did education at street fairs, they did education for Kiwanis clubs and chambers of commerce and uh, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, school groups, camps. They got water-based education that's centered on the bay in schools. For instance, my wife some of you know, is a junior high math teacher, and she actually uses goldfish in a bowl to teach the math behind the estimates that the DNR uses for estimating fish populations in lakes. So just kind of that focus on water, and then also aquatic science in general. And Project WET spans the spectrum. So educators, professional educators like my wife can make use of it, and somebody like me who is maybe doing a street fair booth or has the opportunity to work with Girl Scout troop or a Boy Scout troop or a Future Farmers of America. There's curriculum in there for me too. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, Janine Cohen, who's the Minnesota Project WET coordinator for the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. And she's an educator and has been a delight to work with. After the event, I will send out an email with kind of some of the links and the link to the training and a link to Janine, and you do not have to go through this process alone. Janine will help you. And please feel free to use the chat function if you have any questions. I'll be monitoring that. I'm going to turn off my video and turn it over to Janine. And I'll break in if there's a gap, or at the end we can work our way through the questions. And thank you so much for all you do for our lakes. And Janine, I turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you. So I'm going to go to the corner, Jeff, and I'm going to do the full screen. How's that? Can everyone see that okay? Because I can't see the chat anymore. Do I have a thumbs up? I don't know.
That looks good. It looks good.
Okay. Sounds great. All righty. Well, welcome to this evening, and I'm just going to walk you through a little bit about Project WET. And probably before that, I just want to give you a little background about myself. As Jeff said, I'm an educator, and I actually was a classroom teacher for several years. I've been in education almost like 29 years. And it started in Pennsylvania. My love of the water. I lived not far from Lake Erie. In fact, I plan to be going to visit that soon, next month. So I grew up in Pennsylvania, and then eventually migrated down after college to Florida. And I taught about Florida ecology and water, salt water. And then from there, I migrated out to Colorado, where there's not so much water. So I was like, I don't know. I was wanting to be back to water. So eventually my path brought me back to water and to the Minnesota area. And so that's where I've been for the past almost 20 years. So prior to the DNR, I worked for an organization called Pheasants Forever, which is a conservation organization. And for about 11 to 12 years, I taught about Aldo Leopold and land ethic. And so when I came to the DNR after that time, I had a real good foundation about like conservation. And that's helped me expand it into the water world. So we're going to talk a little bit about water here in Minnesota and how Project Wet historically has been servicing the state for many years. And, Jeff, if you happen to see a question in the chat box and it pertains to a slide or something, please feel free. Anyone, if you have a question about it, interrupt me. I'm fine with that. As Jeff said, I'm pretty flexible too. But there's a need here in Minnesota, as you all know. And we all, as Minnesotans, there's a need to get more information out to people in taking science, especially working at the DNR. How do we take this scientific data that we or PCA that we're gathering, and how do we translate that to the public so it helps people care about their waterways? And so one of those solutions, like Jeff was talking about, is education and outreach. And Project Wet provides these opportunities for people to make those connections. I'm going to skip this because this is the video. And if you haven't had a chance to look at the video from Project Wet, I believe Jeff sent it out as an intro. So feel free to go back to that later on. And it's very informative. Real quick video. Moving along, this is kind of the interaction part of the presentation tonight. So I want you to think about a favorite water memory that you have. Maybe close your eyes for a moment and think of a very favorite water memory. It could be on the lake that you perhaps live on or have a cabin on. And just put it in the chat box. It doesn't have to be. It could be something that you experienced as a child on Lake Michigan somewhere. So there's a lot of information here, but just to summarize, Project Wet is a 501c3 foundation. It's housed out of Bozeman, Montana. It was part of the University of Montana many years ago when it started off, and they started doing workshops and trainings for teachers and people like myself all over the country. Since then, it's morphed into its own foundation. And we have Project Wet all over the United States, including DC, and it's actually all over the world. We have it in conservation districts, in universities, in DNRs, and NGOs, so it can be housed in many different locations. And we're very fortunate here in Minnesota that the DNR kind of took it under its wing 27 years ago. Project Wet, like I said, is international. So we are in several countries around the world and sharing information about water conservation and how do we conserve water, how do we appreciate, how do we learn about our watersheds. In fact, Project Wet is out of this world, and I truly mean this. One of our board members, Ricky Arnold, is an astronaut for NASA. He has my dream job. He was a middle school science teacher like myself, and somehow he was in the right place at the right time and knew the right people. And he ended up as a teacher going up into the International Space Station. And he actually has taken 2 trips up there as an educator, and he does research when he's up there. So what was really cool most recently is Ricky took questions from kids all over the country, well, actually all over the world. And when these kids would have these Fridays that they were able to ask a question to the astronaut, he was able to answer them or take those questions into space and investigate those. So we're really pleased to have someone like that on our team. This year, 2020, Project Wet across the world globally reached 2.8 million people. And we're in 107 countries. We're in all the 50 states. And we have 97 partner organizations we work with worldwide. So you say, how does that happen? How do you do that? Well, here's a little bit of a breakdown. The 2.8 million people using Project Wet worldwide, they use it in a variety of ways. Now, the largest, obviously, is the USA partners like myself, comprise many of that number. And we jumped in this digital world this past year. We increased our reach exponentially. We also do it through publications, and the international partners are a small segment of that. Discoverwater.org, that I'll talk about a little bit later, is an online digital tool. It's kind of like a game, and it takes students through a process of learning about their watersheds. But of course, again, 81% of that is through the partners that, like myself and other coordinators, that work with our constituents in getting the word out there and people trained. So in our numbers, if we break it down a little bit more, over 2,000 facilitators were trained. So sometimes I have a team of facilitators, and I'm always growing that facilitator network, but we train people that will then go out and train others. Like they'll train educators. So we have a team of probably 35 active facilitators here in Minnesota. And then individuals like hopefully some of you will be those people that are trained in Project WET. And then we have educators, over almost 50,000 people, educators using Project WET in a variety of ways. And then all of this results in the wide range of students that have been educated in Project WET worldwide, and it's 2.2 million. It's crazy. Here's a little bit of a breakdown. I like to break it down into rural and urban and suburban percentages of people using Project WET here in Minnesota. And then breaking it down even more, we have who are the people that are using it or that we're training. Actually, last year, pre-service university students were the biggest group that I worked with in the world of COVID. Non-formal are people like nature center employees and people not in a K-12 classroom. And actually, many of you could be part of that non-formal educator, that you would be reaching different groups, but you're not a teacher. And then formal is your education K-12, and then looking to the right is a breakdown of the K-5, middle school, high school, and the pre-K. And we do have a Project WET pre-K curriculum, which we work with that group of audience, and it's a lot of fun. So what's really interesting, this number just came about. I got these numbers last week from our national office. The virtual training use that I'm going to be talking about a little bit later has, it increased so much. In 2019, Project WET trained 17 people online. And then last year, we trained like 4,000 people online. And so Project WET rose to the occasion. I worked with them hand in hand in trying to put together stuff for Minnesota participants, but they were ahead of the game, and they developed online tools so that teachers could use it when they were teaching at home. So the reach was amazing. It was unfortunate that COVID had happened, but we learned different ways to reach our public. What I really enjoyed as the coordinator is I took part in the 19 webinars that our national office offered for educators like myself. And we called them, in the summertime, we called them summer pool parties. And we just shared different ways of doing some of the activities with each other. And in the fall, in the winter, we called it the fireside chat. So it was a lot of fun. Looking at the demographics of who are the people that we're reaching, the total users in 2020, if you take a look, 2.3 million students educated, and then 59% of these teachers are educating lower income students, and 78% of them are primarily working with different cultures. Formal versus non-formal. You see 30% are trained educators that are working in the formal classrooms or informal classrooms, and 51 were the K-12 teachers. So all of this information that we're trying to work through and interpret and share and teach, it all is based on sound science about water. What are the challenges? What are globally, what are we looking at? And taking that from a global sense and breaking it down to right in our backyards. How can we take this information? How can we learn about climate change and our weather and how it's changing over time? How is it affecting the economy? And because of these challenges, how can we address how we look at water moving forward in the future when it talks about city planning? And these students that we're working with are all part of this process. And Project WET gives you the tools that you can use high quality information that's science-based. And how do we use these resources to interpret the landscape and make active decisions in our communities? Like we said earlier, the users, when we break it down, it's anyone can use Project WET. You don't have to be a teacher. In fact, just this past year, Project WET has gone from, it used to be called Water Education for Teachers when it was established in the early 90s. And we just went through an overhaul last year, and our new name, new logo is Water Education Today. So it encompasses many other users besides educators. Looking at these, using the people using WET resources, corporate employees. One of the corporations that we worked with over the past few years is Ecolab, which is based here in St. Paul. Ecolab came to Project WET a few years ago and said, I'd like you guys to create a curriculum that we can use with our staff, that they could go out into their communities and do some engagement and learning about conservation, but more focused on clean water and hygiene. And so they developed these activities for Ecolab, and there's a whole nother curriculum that Ecolab put forth. And they did 4 test markets, Moheim, Germany, Mexico City, Shanghai, and St. Paul, Minnesota. And so I was part of that network that we trained some people, and those Ecolab participants that, employees, got to learn Project WET in the morning, and then we took them right to a school in the afternoon, and they had to teach the Project WET curriculum in the afternoon, and they were phenomenal. It was just a really amazing experience, actually. City planners are using it. And you know what? Hopefully Lakeshore associations will be using this soon with your help. Moving on. This is how, this is the conservation agenda found at the Minnesota DNR. It takes a look right here specifically of Project WET. And over the years, when it came to the DNR in 96, and over the years, how it's grown. And in 2012 to 2000, I came on board in 2013, and I had my predecessor, who I still work with at the DNR, is amazing, but I wanted to take it to the next level. And the only way I could do that was like increasing the number of partnerships that we work with. And because of that partnership connection, we were able to like triple our numbers of outreach in Minnesota. 2020 is going to look a little different because of COVID, and some of that halted, and some of the focus at DNR, as far as the amount of time we put towards education, may affect some of those numbers in the future. But this gives you a landscape of, how fortunate we were that DNR scarfed it up, back in 96, and we've been carrying it on to date. So in a nutshell, Project WET, we're using this to educate future generations. We're helping make those connections, and we're solving real water issues. So how is Project WET used in Minnesota? Well, let's see. And if you look at that right there in that little girl's hands, that's a macroinvertebrate, which is a bioindicator of good water quality. We use Project WET with water institutes with different universities. I work with the University of Minnesota, Century Lakes Community College. I also work with Winona State and a couple other colleges in between. And these are some resource professionals at a watershed meeting that we're training in a thing called the watershed game. And that might be of interest to some of the lakeshore providers, because this is a wonderful tool that you could take into a city planning meeting and get the planners thinking about how we all work together for the health of our watersheds. The kids love it. I do a lot of work with citizen science and partnering with the University of Minnesota in citizen science and monitoring and working with students on how they can do citizen science. I worked with Twin Cities Public Television a few years back, and we did a pilot project with an extension program out of Duluth, where the kids participated in an after-school program where they were learning about their waterways and, the quality of water around their city. As I said, I work with pre-service students. So here's some students from the University of Minnesota that are taking part in training. And then they go and help out at other community events with this training. Couldn't do it. The reason those numbers have jumped is I couldn't do this by myself. I work with scientists. A lot of the colleagues I work with help me out in some capacity. And different government officials working with the National Park Service and NGOs, all to benefit our communities throughout Minnesota. The students are doing field research and learning. One wonderful partnership that we have with the National Park Service is the Big River Journey. It's a riverboat that takes students. We service in the spring probably about 2,000 students, 2,500 students on a boat throughout the spring, and then in the fall we do the same. And one of the stations that the Big River Journey has is the crime scene, and that's Project Wet Station. And we developed this lesson to teach kids about storm drains and where does all of that debris in their neighborhoods go and how does it potentially end up in the Mississippi River. And then we talk about the path of, we're the headwaters of the Mississippi River, and all of that water flows south into the Gulf of Mexico. And so they are investigators trying to figure out and stop these crimes that are happening here at the headwaters. A lot of fun. We do water festivals throughout the state. Some icon water festivals. Right here you see the Children's Water Festival in the Twin Cities. When we went virtual the last 2 years because of COVID. But prior to that, we would service about 2,000 kids at the state fair for a day of water festival activities. Roughly about 40 presenters from different agencies and NGOs sharing different experiences about water and learning. Wonderful opportunity, among others that are around the state. We partnered with Freshwater Society and the Minnesota Water Stewards. Here's a project that I worked on with a team of students from the Minnetonka area. And they came out, they were part of the Trout in the Classroom program that I helped develop here in the Twin Cities. And this school group came out and planted 4,000 plugs that went along this corridor of an apartment complex. And you can see to the left all the plants that they planted and some of the students planting them. And it was to deter the water or slow down the water that was coming from the, sorry about that, girls, twins, sorry. They wanted to make sure that the water wasn't going down to the apartment complex because the street sit higher than where the apartment complex was. And so they also, this project was able to put in a cistern right in between the apartment complexes. And this water was to be collected and diverted and used for irrigation for many of those plantings that we did. So this school group did a little outreach with the retirement community that was on the one end of this project and the residents. And it was an amazing, amazing opportunity for learning for all ages. I do a lot with volunteer programming and work with different volunteers. May it be in the water resource area or it could be in the recreation area. Because when volunteers are working with people to make those connections, people care. They learn why it's important to them. So here's a couple different opportunities. One of them was a Minocqua program that the DNR used to host. And we trained a group of anglers, and I went in and talked about opportunities for understanding water quality and macroinvertebrates and how that's important for if you want to catch fish in healthy waters. Here's some other examples of outreach. One of my colleagues who heads up a Project Wet program in another state, she teams up with the Stream Girls program with the Girl Scouts, and they do surveys on local streams looking for different macroinvertebrates, doing some inventories. They do cleanups along the river. They get a chance to learn how to fish, and then they earn a patch for all of this. So that's another opportunity that that you might be interested in the future. We believe in engaging communities. One of the really fun things that I was able to work on the past few years is the governor's fishing opener. And this particular year was up in St. Cloud, where we would work with school groups and go out and do different lessons pertaining to watersheds and groundwater prior to the governor's fishing opener. And then those kids came out the day of the governor's fishing opener and they learned about things and they were able to do some fishing. And, we even get law enforcement involved in there holding some macroinvertebrates. So I think we were even teaching other people about this. The Minnesota State Fair, a few years ago, I started the Project Wet Water Day. And it's been going on for a few years, and we have different partners coming out sharing what their organization does in behalf of water quality. We have stage presentations and booths all around the DNR fairgrounds. You see a person doing an example of I think it's a groundwater model. We even had Smokey Bear learning how to fly fish there. So this could be an opportunity for lake associations to have a booth at the state fair. Unfortunately, this year we are going to be participating, the DNR, in the state fair, but I think I'm going to hold off this year as far as bringing partners in. So look for some news on this for next year. I had the opportunity of working with our non-game program and doing some research with loons that were affected by the BP oil spill. And maybe that resonates with some of you. You may live on lakes throughout where maybe some of these loons have been monitored and they might have, like little bracelets on, if you will. More than likely, they've been captured by my colleagues and I to learn information about their health and their migratory path. So I was able to take this information and do some presentations and share it with school groups around the state. Ultimately, the goal is to learn and have fun and, hold baby loons. But we convert this data to real life with Project Wet. I want students and participants learning about Project Wet understand what part do you play in the whole big scheme of things. Are we going to be teaching and having people make different decisions about how much salt that they're using in the wintertime, or maybe the plantings that they're going to do along their landscape if they own water, or if they own land on water, invasive species, or how much phosphorus is going in by the chemicals that we use on the land, where are we washing our car? And I think the biggest problem that we see this in the last 2 years is these wonderful masks that we've been wearing. I don't know about you, but every time I go out and about, I see masks in the streets. I see them in the storm drains. I see them in the water. I see them outside grocery stores. And you know what? They're going to affect our waterways and they're going to affect our wildlife. So how can we bring awareness to this? We're sharing the facts. We're making a difference. Sharing information about what is a healthy landscape and what isn't. And 1 pound of phosphorus equals kids in a gross water body with 500 pounds of algae. We make it real. We share stories, and we're always making connections through Project Wet. I believe in thinking outside the box. And, what was it, 2017, I believe the Super Bowl came here to the Twin Cities, and I get a random phone call from a colleague and said, can you help us? WCCO wants to do something kind of cool on the top of their studio, because they're not hosting the Super Bowl this year, but they want to do something really cool. So they wanted to put an ice fishing shack on the top of their studio. And I worked with our head fisheries director at DNR, and we were able to help them make that a reality. And so there's trout in that little makeshift ice house at the very top of the WCCO. And we invited school groups to come out with Al Linder and learn about fishing and water quality. And so from there, WCCO did a story on Project Wet, and they followed a group of kids out on the ice to do some real ice fishing, and back in the classroom learning about how they're using Project Wet to learn about their watersheds and to keep some fish alive that were in their classroom that they would release in the spring. And the bonus, because I'm a Steeler fan, I got to meet a Steelers football player. There's always a bonus in this. Don't judge me. Sharing new resources. This year we rolled out a new program called Wet Connect. It's an all digital program for educators to use in their classrooms with their students online. Highly successful, just rolled out in the last month and a half. We also rolled out this past year the new climate change curriculum, and we're doing lessons and trainings on climate change. Ultimately, we all benefit from clean water, may it be wildlife, insects, or us at the lake. And what does this mean for potentially you? Hopefully, many of you will become trained in Project Wet. First off, you can sign up for our newsletter that comes out quarterly. I hope that some of you might feel comfortable being presenters in your community and to build this network. And I'm here to help you, and so's Jeff. Some of the places that you can start looking for these potential partners might be schools or summer camps coming up this summer, scout groups, like Jeff said, church groups. Maybe you want to create a water festival. I'm here to help you. Again, we want to have fun. And I think Luna Leopold summed it up with this quote here: water's the most critical resource issue of our lifetime and our children's lifetime, and the health of our waters is the principal measure of how we live on the land. And, this rings true. I, again, mentioned earlier, I had the privilege of being friends with the Leopold family. Unfortunately, I never got to meet Luna. I only talked to him on the phone, but I've hung out with his sister, Nina, and Carl Leopold, and Estella, who's still alive today. And I learned a lot through their father's writings, who wrote the Sand County Almanac. He was the father of ecology. He was the father of wildlife biology. And, he probably changed my life. I look at things in a different way. And especially, I look at things when I look at young individuals like this. Those are my girls. And I want to teach them how to care about the water. And they got to love the water before they care about the water. Now, I'm going to thank you all for your time. It's such a weird virtual world to give a presentation and not hear what anyone's saying. So, Jeff, we can open it up for questions or comments or thoughts. And I just want to thank you for letting me share a little bit about what I have the privilege to do for the DNR with Project Wet.
Thanks, Janine. Shirley asked, when was the curriculum last updated?
Let's see, in 2011, the new Curriculum 2.0 came out, and the new climate change curriculum just came out last year. But that's a great question. So
and the curriculum meets the new science standards. So I think it was 2 years ago the state upgraded their minimum science standards. So if there's an educator that's involved, they can use the Project What curriculum, and it will meet the state science standards.
Yeah, so 2 years ago, we completed the Next Generation Science Standard, NGSS, and Common Core. So on the national site, and I'll be updating it on our Minnesota site, all of those correlations to national, NGSS, and Common Core, Project Wet has spent extensive time explaining and showing how we meet those high-end standards. But the state standards, they align with state standards, but there's not a correlation as of yet. Meaning, teachers will go in and they will see that it aligns with NGSS or Common Core, and then they take the lessons. It's explained and quite easy for teachers to justify why they're using it in their classroom. That's a great question. Thanks, Jeff.
And what is involved in the training, hours and cost? So I did the introductory training before the session, and I think it took me maybe an hour.
Yeah.
And you'll get to a point where you'll take a little quiz or do a kind of a description as to how you want to use the Project Wet curriculum. Like, for instance, we're on Lake Vermilion, and up in Ely, they have the Blueberry Festival every year, and you can get a booth there. The lake associations get booths there, and there's curriculum that you can set up at that kind of a booth that demonstrates what a watershed is, or games that you can play with kids about percentage of the earth that's covered with water. And you can kind of pick your interest, and it'll give you different examples. Then Janine will send you a code, and you use the code to order a book, which is $40. And that has more resources in it. And then there's more online training available, kind of based on your interest and your requirements. You sort of move through the system in that way. Does that describe it, Janine?
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to if we want to answer some more questions, and then I gave that introduction sheet on how someone would go through a training. We can do that in a little bit, but there might be some other questions about the presentation I just gave, and then we can go into that a little bit more if there's time.
I can.
Is there any
would be $40. Do you want me to pull up the training sheet?
Yeah, why don't we do that? And then, I sure want to answer questions and look at some of the comments.
Okay.
Do I need to quit sharing? I probably do.
Yeah.
Did I quit?
I
think I did. Yeah, I'm done sharing.
And then let me pull up.
I'm not done sharing. Oh. Okay.
Can you see it?
Yep, I can. And basically, everyone, this was kind of a cheat sheet that I put together for just this group. And this is the way that you would go about if you want to get trained in Project Wet. If you look at the bottom of this sheet is a link that you will go to connect to the online training, which is provided through and sponsored through the National Project Wet. But when you first go onto the site, you're going to be looking at, like Jeff said, different lessons. And they're going to walk you through, and you can't cheat. You have to go and watch it, and then you click to the next and click to the next. And then it's going to guide you to a point where you're going to stop and you're going to pick like a lesson that you might think would apply, like you would think about that lesson, and you're going to write about how you might use that in your community. And it gives you 3 different lessons to choose from. And you're just going to write about it. You're going to think about, I might use this with the 5th grade class in our community, or I might use this with the church group at our school. And then you write about it. You read the lesson, excuse me, and then you write about it. You might write, you might take a picture of the place that you might do the training at or the presentation. If you use pictures, you got to have photo permission if there's people in it. And then you'll send that to me. And then you want to include the community you're representing. So if you live on, I don't know, Lake Vermilion, you know, you're going to say that you work on, or you're going to be using this with the Lake Vermilion group, and where you're at, maybe how many kids are you going to service, or maybe it's not even kids. Maybe you're going to go to a watershed meeting and do a lesson for city planners or something. I'm sorry. But you'll go through that, and then you'll send that to me. Excuse me. I'm getting all choked up, Jeff.
Yeah.
And you'll send that to me, and I will send you a code, like Jeff said. That code will allow you to register formally for the training, and then you'll pay your registration fee of $40, and then you're going to give the address of where you want the book sent to you. As soon as you get the book, and it comes pretty quick, a woman named Kyla will send that out to you. And then when you receive the book, you can finish the rest of the training. And there's a serial code in the book that you're going to have to put in. And then it'll guide you through this online portal. And you don't have to be overly tech savvy. It is really user friendly, and you just kind of click and then move to the next. And so it shows you different things that you can use at your disposal. And then the most important thing at the very end for both Jeff and I is that if you've completed this, you know, please take a picture. You're able to give yourself a certificate. After you've completed, you're able to print it off and then send me a copy of that certificate. So then I know and can put you on a list of people that have been certified in Project Wet. And we're really going to keep track of the Lakeshore group. And this is very important for Jeff to know as well. So that's kind of the completion of it. And then I'm here to help you work through it and see, you know, how we can expand this opportunity. You know, because Jeff said in the very beginning, you know, I know you all care about your lake shores. How do we get future generations to care as much as you are? You know, we want to build this legacy, and Project Wet's a wonderful tool for you to be able to do that. And so
people, you know, care about things they understand.
Right.
You know, and I'm always amazed at the number of people who don't understand that the storm sewer runs into the lake. Right? They just think it goes away somewhere, and it doesn't. They're not connecting the water on their property to the water that's in the lake. And it's the same. Water moves across a landscape. And so get people to think about it. Maybe they don't, dump that can of oil in the gravel in the driveway, or whatever it is that they're doing. They have the information that they need, and they're making those connections themselves, and they start to make different decisions. And this was really the key with the Chesapeake is, as these school age kids grew and began to run businesses and have jobs and so forth, they had the health of the Chesapeake Bay front of mind because they had learned about it in school and understood the connections and understood how their actions impacted the quality of the water in the Chesapeake Bay. Um, and if we can get that same sort of synergy happening in the state of Minnesota, or the more that we do, the better off I think we're going to be. A question: as an AIS detector, which is through the Minnesota Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center, I'm required to do 25 hours of volunteer work to maintain my certification. Is there a similar requirement for Project WET?
If you become a facilitator, I ask that. And right now, if you were to go through this training, you're an educator, and that's what the requirement is going through this training. My hope is that you would use it at least once, but no, unless you were to go to that next level and become a facilitator, which I welcome that too, but we'll just go one step at a time. For our facilitators, I require them to do one outreach event a year. It could be putting on a workshop, or it could be doing a water festival, or it could be doing a community event. So when you become that facilitator, that's when we get to the level of requirement. But I'm pretty easy on people. I just want you to use it, and I want to be able to help you. So I don't want.
I would imagine. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I try to make sure that there's not too many barriers in sharing this information.
I would imagine that doing Project WET might, the time that you invest in it might count for the AIS detectors program.
You could. It's
Or,
professional development.
yeah, or if you did an event or ran a booth, or took a lesson to a Sunday school class, or wherever people are gathered. Any resorts using this program? Like, this could be great, kind of afternoon or around the campfire um, enrichment activity for people that are staying at a resort.
And I can't speak exactly to certain resorts, but I know a lot of the students that I train, especially at UMD Duluth, they'll go on in the summer, or actually in Brainerd, they'll go on to do like they do summer camps. So they might work at a resort and do some of these lessons at a summer camp. So I can't say that it's not being used, but formally, I don't know this. Because, sometimes when you train someone, you don't know how they're using it if they don't let you know how they're using it. So I always like to know, contact me. Hey, Janine, we did this. And I'll put it on the national, Facebook page. A lot of times when I have a really cool instructor, they do something really unique. I put it out there and the world sees.
A couple of years ago, we started a pilot demonstration in Ramsey County, and one of the uh, participants in that is a Girl Scout from White Bear Lake. And they've developed a program working with the Watershed District, doing veliger tows and surveying the lakes for zebra mussels. And another group within the troop did a lead out program for swans that were ingesting lead tackle.
Oh,
And it's such a hoot. I mean, it's been difficult with COVID to work with the Girl Scouts, but Lake Association people were able to donate boats and get the girls out in a safe way that met the COVID requirements, social distancing requirements, and they were able to do the work. And there was a partnership with the White Bear Lake High School to use their equipment to, their their um, uh, the magnifying glass to look for the veligers in the water,
Sure.
and it's been a great partnership.
Microscopes.
Microscope, that's it, microscope. Um, After
No.
taking the training, I don't think it's targeted mainly for children. That's kind of the thing here is there's sort of a menu, and as you say, well, I'm going to be speaking to a Kiwanis club, and you can move into different types of activities, different lessons, depending on how you want to use the program, who you are speaking to. Is that
Yeah, and actually, I'm speaking to a group of anglers tomorrow about this. I was asked to speak with a Rotary Club recently, and so no, it just depends on what you want to accomplish. Do you want to build awareness with adults or families, or you can work with kids? Block parties, yes, I love that. And I think this group, Jeff, has the opportunity to be really creative. I'm all about thinking outside the box, and I want to see this go to the next level. I think that in the very beginning it was targeted when it was written in the '90s. The man that developed it was a teacher, a middle school teacher. So I think the focus was more classroom teachers. But in the years that have developed since, most recently, they understand Project Wet, that it's not just about the kids. They're the hub, but everyone understanding the importance of their watersheds, because we don't have this infinite amount of water, and one of the lessons is about that, like you were talking about, Jeff. We have to take care of the water that we have. Some of the water that we have in Minnesota is not drinkable, fishable. You can't recreate in it. And so sometimes just because we have a lot of water doesn't mean that it's healthy water. And so I think that lake associations have such a pivotal and powerful opportunity to influence their communities. And so I embrace any idea that you would have on how you would use this curriculum. And I'd love to help you.
I think it would work great at a lake association meeting. One of the lessons that I came across while I was doing it was a lesson to demonstrate what a watershed is.
Mhm.
And we talk about watersheds and basins and kind of different scale of watersheds. And with the One Watershed, One Plan happening now, there's an opportunity for lake associations to connect with decision makers, policymakers on the ground projects that get funded. But how do you communicate what a watershed is to your lake association members? You can have a map and they sort of, can see that and be like, oh, okay. But the lesson I saw was a really dynamic demonstration of it that really that makes it experiential. So they experience the watershed. And so as you have different issues before your lake association, like maybe salt or maybe One Watershed, One Plan, or nutrient loading, there's lessons that you can use to illustrate the point for your members. And then the other thing I would say is when you talk about the kids, my daughters are my youngest daughter is graduating high school this year, and she has a job for the summer. And so for the first time, my wife and I went up north to open the cabin without children, you know. And I'm volunteering for the Vermilion Lake Association this summer doing Lake Steward because I have time. Until now, I was doing kids stuff. So if you want to bring younger people in to the Lake Association and engage with them, you've got to engage their kids because that's where they are. And if you start engaging the kids, then the parents are going to show up. And you can get kind of younger people involved in like association work, volunteerism, or just understanding the mission of the Lake Association.
It's interesting because I used to do a lot of things. I developed a camp here in Minnesota that actually I'm pretty excited because finally the camp I developed, and it's went to other hands, and I'm super excited about it. My kids are actually going to be able to participate in the camp
That's
that I developed.
wonderful.
And they didn't know that the other night. They're like, "What are you talking about, Mom?" I'm like, "I created this camp that you're going to go to." But what's it's kind of cool about that is they're learning about the resources and watersheds, and then they're tying recreation with it. So they're making that link of the importance of the habitat to the recreation that we do. And I think that's a very important thing for many of us to learn. And one thing that I heard from a lot of the programs that I used to develop, the parents would come and drop their kids off. They're like, "When are you going to do this for the adults, Janine? Like, when are you going to hold a fishing camp for just adults? We don't want to bring our kids." And so I did. And it's grown. I've had people from other states hear about it. And these adults come to these camps because they still want to learn too. So I think that it doesn't have to be just kids. We can have a water camp for adults. So.
Rich says county colas, which are coalitions of lake associations within a county, Janine, would be a good avenue for getting this information out and then push it to the associations. I totally agree. And, Otter Tail County Cola had a educator that was on their board, and they developed a really great curriculum for high school kids in Otter Tail County. And the last I checked on it, they'd had a couple thousand kids through it.
That's
So
awesome.
now there's a toehold. And you can start to, that was focused on aquatic invasive species, but there's so many other water issues that we're trying to manage. And, I think about like my daughter, we did the gun safety training course together, and then we go deer hunting and we get back to camp and we get to the fire, and I unloaded my rifle. And my daughter looked at me and said, "Dad, you should have done that before we got to camp." She'd had the training. And I was like, yes, you're right. So the kids start to remind us of, the kids end up teaching the adults and bringing the parents along in a really authentic way. Any other questions?
So Jeff, I hope people were reading other people's comments because everyone likes to share their own stories. And so I'm now able to go into the chat and start reading. Hopefully Rick didn't lose me because it said, "Did we lose Janine?" So hopefully that wasn't the case.
No, he came back. We
Okay,
we privately texted back and forth.
okay, good. But I love this activity. And I do this at workshops because everyone has a story to tell. And there's always a connection with water. And when I open up a training like this, when I do it in person, we find common ground. May it be, someone that had a cabin on Lake Michigan when they were a kid, and someone else in the room did too, or they, swam in the Dead Sea or whatever. I've heard some really interesting ones. And at the very end, I have everyone do this activity, and they all have a little Dixie cup or some kind of cup with water, and then we all pour it into one vessel. And I ask everyone, what does this one vessel symbolize? And it symbolizes we're all part of this one watershed, like literally all over the world. We're all connected. And that's the beauty about Project Wet, is that water connects us all. And yes, it's a little tagline that everyone's using, but it truly does connect us. And we can't live without water. And even if you live in the desert, you still need water. I mean, my colleague who does Project Wet in Arizona is going gangbusters. She's like my hero. She does amazing work with very little water. But we have a lot of water here. And so we have a big responsibility to take care of it and share this this love of conservation and taking care of the water and connecting it to people so that they take an active role in their environment. And sometimes it's hard to do that, but when you have tools at your leisure like this, it's easy to do that. And I'm looking at all these kind of cool different you know experiences, and I think we can do some great things, Jeff. And I hope I'll get to meet all of you someday. Jeff and I talked about, if you take this training, that at another time within the year, we do a follow-up in-person training that you would not get charged for, and that I would come and we would do some of these activities, and we'd share these experiences that you've tried Project Wet. And I'm looking forward to that time that I can meet you, and hopefully you've gone through this experience and this training, and then I can help you in your communities. So,
right. And that's a great point, is this is kind of the first step.
mm-hmm.
This is the introduction, but this is the beginning of a relationship. So you're going to see more of Janine, and she's very much available to help you as you do this, as am I. So, you can stay in touch. You can say, I was thinking about doing this or trying that. And Janine has a lot of experience and can be a good guide. Anne says her lake memory is rising early on the weekend to go fishing with my dad on Big Sandy Lake.
Very nice.
And I was actually telling Janine that when I was young, we had a rowboat. My mom would say, I want crappies for breakfast. And so she would wake me up before the sun came up, and we'd go out and catch crappies and come back and make crappies for everybody for breakfast. One day of our 2-week vacation up north. And I, really treasure that. It's a special thing.
And I think, not everyone's is into fishing, but a lot of people do like fishing. I'm sorry, that's my dog who wants to go to the bathroom, but he's ringing the bell. But, I have to share it, like when we're talking about fishing. So I head up a really big fly fishing group in Minnesota, and that has nothing to do with DNR. But what wonderful memory I have is it was Easter morning a couple years ago. We were down on the Whitewater, and we were camping at the DNR campground there. And it was with a group of people. And my daughter, well, I have twins. And so my husband, Benji, took Lily up north. And then I had Hayden, who just walked by me, and she's just waving. She was standing in the water with me, and the sun was coming through the trees on the water, and she's just casting. And I will never forget that, because it was the most peaceful time that I've had in forever, because I just am thinking about this girl, like appreciating the watershed, and she's casting. And this is her right here.
Who are you on a meeting?
A lot of people. Say hello and be polite. And I'll remember that forever. I'll remember that forever. And that's what it's all about, is passing it on to the next generation. And, that's why I do what I do. So I've been an environmental educator the better part of my life. I'm a big advocate of the environmental education component of Minnesota. And my goal in my private world is to push that even further. I would like to make that a priority in Minnesota, because that's who's going to take care of our waters in the future. Those are the people that are going to pay for conservation. So I don't know how much time I have left on this earth, but that's my job. So, and I'm here to help you. So.
And Anne says now they have a new memory, sailing on Lake Superior. That sounds fantastic. And Patrick Murphy with Clara spoke with the Clear Lake Association last week and will speak at Ripple next week. Would Janine be available to speak to our Clara in person? That's the Aiken County Lake and River Association, June 12th. Apparently, he has some bad audio. Is my audio bad?
Who has bad audio? I do or you do?
I
Or
don't
he?
know. Patrick says he does. But
Oh, okay.
you got an invite to speak June 12th.
June 12th. And when is that? That's coming up, right?
Yeah. Weekend after next, Saturday.
Well, I would love to do anything in person, but because I work for the DNR, we cannot do anything in person. Not yet.
9:30 in the morning.
Yeah, I can't do anything in person. So this is as good as it gets for right now until some restrictions get lifted. So I'm hoping that it's going to happen this summer, and I'll be able to do more in-person stuff. So, I mean, if it's virtual, well, is June 12th a weekend? When is that?
This Saturday.
Oh,
Not
it's
this
this Saturday?
Not this Saturday. This Saturday is the 5th.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So next
That might be a
Saturday.
little short notice. Yeah. But I'd be maybe in the future, like we can talk, and if they can stream me in, I don't know if that.
Patrick, I'll send an email out to everyone that has Janine's email on it, and you can email her directly.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I'd be open when things get lifted with the DNR. I mean, they've been wonderful and very protective of our staff, and I respect that. But I'll be looking forward to when I can do some in person stuff. So stay tuned. But I can
All
do
of us,
virtual
all
stuff.
of us are looking forward to that. All of us.
I know it's just crazy.
Well, I'm not seeing any more questions, and thanks everyone for coming. It's been quite a year, and we're almost coming out of it, and it's time to start. I think we're going to be able to start meeting with people and doing things in person soon, and that's great. And now we have some curriculum that we can use, some ideas to engage people of different ages, backgrounds, and interests, which is really quite useful. And so thank you, Janine, for sharing this with us tonight.
Oh yeah, definitely. And feel free to look at the Minnesota, Project website as well as the national site. And what I might add is there's a curriculum guide. I don't know if it's just a guide, but it's a guide on how to put on a water festival, and it's free. So if you look on the Minnesota State website, I've taken a lot of the curriculum guides and I let people know if you could just buy it or if you have to get a training or if it's free. So please check out the Minnesota DNR website so you can look at curriculum materials. I'm in the process of updating some things on that. So, but I look forward to hearing from you. And if you want to start your adventure getting trained, it's really very minimal time on your end. And you can do it at your own pace. That's what's nice. Jeff started it. And then, I don't even know, did you finish it up or you're finishing it up?
I have not finished it up yet.
Yeah.
But when I opened the tab, it took me right back to where I had left off.
Great. Good.
I got to the point of getting the first code.
Okay, great. So
Yeah.
it's free up to a certain point. You send in like an assignment to me. I give you and open up the rest of the training to you. So
Yeah, it's great. It was really kind of fun, actually. Well, thanks everyone. And I will post, we have recorded this, so I will post this on the website. If you want to share it with anyone else or the board, then they'll have access to what you have access to. And have a wonderful summer.
yes, and I look forward to connecting to many of you. And thanks for your time.
Yeah.
So,
And we'll probably see each other in person in the not too distant future.
that sounds good.
Thanks everyone. Be
Great.
well.
Thank you. So Jeff, how many people did we have joining us tonight?
I think it was 30 something. Hold on a second.
Great. chicken necks